What's going on, button pushers? If you guys are new here, welcome to the channel. If you guys are coming back, welcome back. It's so awesome to see you again. I took apart my camera. I completely obliterated it. I took it apart piece by piece just for fun. So I haven't touched my Canon T2i in about 9 years or so I figured, why leave it sitting on the shelf when I can just take it and make a project out of it? So, I think you guys have seen these things everywhere on the internet. This is by Grid Studio. I really like what they do, but I figured, hey, why don't I just make one like this? And I didn't see any that were made with DSLRs. I've seen some Google images, but it isn't really the same kind of vibe. It's like disassembled every single piece, and it's not like super clean. It looks really good, but it isn't as clean as the stuff that Grid Studio makes. So I reached out, asked them like, hey, what do you guys do? What's your process? And I got no response, so I just figured, hey, I'm just gonna take it into my own hands. So this is clearly the inspiration here, but the T2i was the first ever camera that I bought with my own money, so this project kind of holds like a little bit of sentimental value to it because this is kind of what got me started to where I am today. And honestly, I'm very proud of where I've come, and I'm sure a lot of people are proud of how far they've become. So I kind of did this as like a milestone, kind of like a reminisce, and kind of just to be there to remind me where I started. So before we jump into the project and kind of break down exactly what I did and how I did and when I did it, everything cost me about $120 or so, minus the camera and the lens, of course. I don't even remember how much I bought it for, but I bought it back in 2011, 2012, and that was like my freshman year of high school. So that was a really long time ago, and I don't even remember how much it cost, but we're not going to count that in the price because it's been 9 years or 9 to 10 years since then, and it doesn't really count. So the main expenses were, one, tools to ensure I had everything I needed, super glue, we had the boards for the printing, we had the frames, and the frames and the boards were pretty much the only real expenses there, and we also got some sandpaper. Time-wise, it took me a few days, because I had to wait for shipping. I had to get a bunch of new tools as I was going along that I didn't know I needed from the start, and it just took a few days. Honestly, you could get it all done in one day if you know exactly what you need and have everything ahead of time. So if this is something you're interested in doing, hopefully this video helps. So guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. I've added some chapters so you guys can kind of go through and see exactly what happens where, and if you guys are coming back into this video later, I'm sure the chapters will help you find where you are, because this might be a pretty long video, I don't know. So guys, first things first, I bought a toolkit specifically made for disassembling and repairing cameras. This is always better, just to make sure they have the right tools for the job. And the next thing is just to start disassembling. We're gonna start with the back of the camera. So what we need to do is kind of unscrew all the screws around the camera itself, because this is gonna help us get to the LCD screen and expose the main circuit board. Now once we have that, we're just gonna pop the back of the camera right off, and of course there are going to be a lot of ribbons and stuff because the LCD is connected to the back of the camera, which also has ribbons, which also connect to the main circuit board. So it's all kind of conjoined here, and you kind of just need to slowly start taking things apart. And you got to take those ribbon cables off, and you got to be super careful with them, because ribbon cables are super sensitive and they're super easy to rip. Also to mention, I am keeping every single screw that I'm taking off here in a nice little lens cap right here, because I want to stay organized, and if I do end up needing to re-screw things, I know exactly where all the screws are and they're not just flying around my desk. This is really good to do if you guys are ever disassembling your camera, because again, it's organized and lens caps are really good for that. So I finally get the LCD out of the back of the camera with all the ribbons and whatnot, and only to find out Canon used to use Sony monitors as their LCD monitors, and that's pretty funny. It's pretty crazy to see in the first place, but that was super interesting to find out. And this whole process is really like a really big learning thing for me, because disassembling the camera, I can see how everything works together, and what products they use and kind of how they piece things together and how things interact. So it's pretty cool. Anyways, Now we're going to move on to the main circuit board. This blue piece here is kind of where the processor and everything in the camera leads to, because this is where all the information goes and everything gets sent out from here. So this is a super crucial part of the camera, and this is where we get the Digic 4 processor too. It's on the back side, covered up, you can't see it here. But to take off the main circuit board, we first have to take the top of the camera off of the thing itself. We have to remove all of the ribbons because there's so many interactions between the top of the camera and the main circuit board, because you have the on and off switch, you have the viewfinder, you've got the actual little LED monitors with all the information, you've got the ISO buttons, you've got the shutter, you've got everything. You've got all the wheels and knobs and buttons that you really need to use. So we got to get rid of all those ribbons, disconnect them, and then finally, when it comes off, we have the ability to take off the main circuit board, and it is really beautiful. It's really clean, really nice, and I really like it. On top of that, we're going to take off the sensor, but you can't really see that here because, well, thanks to the R5, there is a 30-minute recording limit. I didn't notice the 30-minute recording limit had hit until 2 minutes later at 32 minutes. So here's the sensor. It looks really clean, looks super cool. This is the thing that you guys want to protect, but hey, it's out in the open. But I did wrap it in plastic wrap. Now we have to take out the DC power board. Now this is actually located where the camera grip would normally be, and this is kind of to just power everything really, and it's just basically a really big, not even really big, just a rechargeable AA battery. And it's pretty funny, but there's a lot of stuff that leads to here to get powered, and it's pretty cool to see, because, you know, this is one of those things that you don't even realize is in the camera because you think everything's just powered by the battery itself, but no. From here, we have to take out the whole lens mount mechanism, including the shutter and the memory card and battery circuit board. Now, I didn't even know that the battery and the memory circuit board existed, but they're completely separate from everything else, which is also really cool to see. This piece here is that piece, and this is where you put in the SD card, this is where you put in the battery, and everything gets powered through there. And then all of that information gets sent to the main circuit board, which is pretty freaking cool. Now we unscrew it together, and it's really simply just two different pieces. And then we can take off the shutter piece as well, and at the end of the day, it's kind of crazy to see how all of this stuff interacts with one another and just how it looks internally. And after removing everything, I'm just going to lay it all out, take a look at everything, and I wrap the sensor in plastic again just to keep it clean. It's really cool how everything looks disassembled. We're going to pack these away and we're going to start on the lens now. But even throughout this whole process, there were a ton of pieces that I didn't end up taking out until afterwards, that I didn't actually get to record, like the microphone, the speaker, and whatnot, because I didn't really see them originally. So, you know, as I was playing with the stuff and then measuring everything and figuring things out, I saw them and I decided to take them out because I feel like they would make cool additions. So that's some stuff you won't see until the final product, but you know, there's just a lot of things in there that you don't really notice until later, and I just want to point that out because there will be some pieces in the final product that I didn't actually get to record because it just happened in a moment. Anyways, moving on to the lens. So we have to start from the back, unscrew the lens mount, and we have to be super careful that once we finally get this off, we don't just pull it up directly because there's a ribbon that connects everything, and since it's a digital lens rather than a film lens, this ribbon helps share all that lens data to the camera. So once I remove the electronic pieces from the lens mount, out come two shims, which are pretty much there to help add some distance between the electronic parts and the lens mount. And we do have to end up cutting this ribbon on the electronic piece because it doesn't come off so easy, so we had to end up cutting it, but that's completely okay. Now we're inside the lens, and the first thing we're going to take out is the autofocus gears, and it's really cool to see how these work because when the autofocus is switched on, all the gears cooperate, but when manual is turned on, a single latch falls down to disconnect all the gears from moving, and it's just super sick to see how all of this kind of works together because you wouldn't have thought like a single piece, a single latch controlled all of that in a lens. This right here is what your camera looks like when you're zooming in and out. Kind of cool to see from an internal perspective rather than just from the front of the lens. Anyways, once we remove the focusing mechanism, there's nothing else we can really do from the back of the lens. So I took out all the screws I could find. So now we're going to jump to the front of the lens. It took me a bit to figure this out because when I handled with all my other film lenses, like my actual lenses that I did, the Canon FD lenses, it was like a screw off filter for the front of the lens, so I just had to remove the ring in the front. But for these lenses, it was actually just a sticker, and once I removed the sticker, it revealed the screws I needed to remove the front element. So once we take off the sticker, I just unscrewed it, removed the front element, and then we're gonna need to remove everything inside of that. Super easy, super simple. Everything is just unscrewing, and then there's another little element inside, another glass lens group element, and we just need to remove the focus gear, the plastic focus gear. We can just peel it off. It's not really stuck on there, it's not glued down or anything, it's really just kind of wrapped around. So once we take that off, we just simply unscrew the screws out of there. I believe there were 3, and then the element inside the lens just comes right out. And well, everything is now disassembled, so I decided to take a break for the day, relax, and kind of collect my mind for the next day. So that was it for day 1. Next comes day 2. In day 2, I just took everything back out, and I knew what I had to do next, so laid everything out, got my calipers, and luckily I had them laying around because it is super crucial to have this next step. You gotta measure everything. I measured the length and the width of everything, the height, and it was important because you have to map everything out if you want a super clean frame. So I did all of this. I measured every single piece, put the data on my phone, and went into Photoshop. Now when you go into Photoshop, you gotta make sure you're doing inches and not pixels. Luckily, before I even did this at all, me and my girlfriend went to Michael's to pick up some frames, and I decided to pick up some display cases that looked like they would be a good fit. So we went with a 16x20 for the camera and a 9x20 for the lens, and I think these were perfect dimensions, except the 9x20 was a little bit abnormal when it comes to frames. And I don't know if you guys can hear that drilling, but my neighbors are doing some construction on their house, I guess, so hopefully that doesn't pick up too much. Thanks guys. So now we get to begin mapping out this stuff. So I started off by creating a bunch of shapes with the right dimensions that I had on my phone. So just going from my phone to Photoshop, I made sure that everything was the right shape, right size, and that kind of allows us to know exactly what we're working with, what we can keep, what we can't keep, what we might need to remove, or even what we need to scale down a bit. Because I want to make sure that everything I want can fit, and we also want to make sure that it can fit within an inch of each edge, because we don't want things bleeding on the edges. We don't want things sitting right on the frame because that could cause some issues. So we need to make sure we leave some bezel room, you know? There was about an inch of bezel on each side, and that was super crucial when it came to the framing because it might have led to some really bad issues. After having all the shapes and putting them where I thought that I wanted them, it was time to get the text down. And the text was really crucial also because I want to add some educational value to this DIY project. I want people to read it and be like, hey, this is a little bit of cool information. Like I talked about the EF lens mount when it came to the lenses. When it came to the camera, I talked about, when it came to the camera, you know, I labeled a bunch of things and I put a little segment on the DC power board because I felt like that was really important, and it talked about the SD and, you know, some stuff there, you know, the type of battery it uses, because at the time of releasing that camera, the T2i was really kind of revolutionary, I would say. Like it was a really nice standard basic starter camera, and it was really awesome. And at the time, I believe, you know, it was a really long time, but it's one of these staples in a lot of people's careers. So I didn't want too much text, I didn't want too little text, I didn't want too much space or too little space between each of the pieces. So having this and mapping it out was super crucial. So at the end of these next few days, this is what I ended up coming up with for the camera mapping. It does look a little bit weird, a little bit empty for now, but once all the pieces get on there, it's gonna look a lot better. And this next step, don't try it at home. Find something better. So my friend Vince came by at my request, of course. I asked him to help me out with sawing down some of the lens pieces because I wanted to ensure that they were flush enough that they fit inside the frame. But he came over and he didn't bring his saw. He completely forgot. And we ended up cutting it with a kitchen knife. And oddly enough, it was pretty successful. So if you guys are wondering if you can cut your lens with a kitchen knife, yeah, you can. So luckily this wasn't a metal lens, because the metal probably wouldn't have cut. So everything in this piece was plastic. Even there was like a silver tape that looked like it was metal, but it was just tape. Thanks Canon for cheaping out, because if you had used metal, we wouldn't have been able to cut it. But again, essentially we just needed to lay it down as a half dome so that it would fit in the frame and kind of display it a little bit. And I wanted half of it to show the lens gear and then half of it to show the internals without the lens gear. And we did just that. So surprisingly, again, we cut it with a kitchen knife. Thanks Vince, helped a lot. With all this done, now was time to map out the lens pieces and the lens frame. And honestly, this was a lot easier. There was a lot less pieces. They, all were about the same size or so, and everything fit really well, especially in the 9x20 frame. It wasn't too much space, too much extra. There was enough space for pretty much everything I wanted in there, and it looked really good based on the mapping, of course. And well, that was it, and this is what we ended up coming up with. Super simple, super clean, and something that might look really awesome. Now we head to the next step, Vistaprint. So Vistaprint is a website, and again, I'm gonna say that we're not sponsored or anything, but I used them a lot, back in the day when I first started out. Business cards, these were like my go-to websites. Vistaprint was really good. There's always sales, so I went to them because I knew that they do pretty decent jobs. And well, I didn't even know that they had foam boards, but they did. So we printed this on foam boards because I figured it'd be a lot easier. It cost me about $35 or so, and again, it was really simple. So what we had to do was just upload our designs on here. So the 16x20 was a perfect size. They had that size for me, and that was just absolutely amazing. So we did two 16x20 boards, one for the 9x20. I dragged it to the far left, so I only had to cut one side when it came in, and it made it a lot easier. So got my order in, and now we wait. And honestly, this whole time we just had to hope nothing went wrong, because all of this is out of our control. We got the design, we got the disassembly, we got everything, but the print was not up to us. We didn't have any control over the quality or if they messed up the board or anything in shipping. So hopefully, we were just sitting here hoping that it comes out good. So unfortunately, the footage for when the foam boards came in got deleted, because I guess I forgot to dump the card before I formatted it for my next shoot, and it was gone. But the boards came in, and well, they looked awesome. I had to cut the 9x20 board with a knife first, and then I used scissors, because well, they didn't have a 9x20, because again, it was a really abnormal shape for a frame. But luckily, when I was cutting it, I did have the back piece of the frame that I would push down, so it wouldn't mess up the foam board too much when I was cutting it, because you know how foam boards might be. They're hard to cut, and they could mess up and kind of like put a crack across the entire board. So luckily it didn't, and it came out really good. I put them in the frames, everything fit super snug, maybe a little bit too snug, to the point where I had a little bit of trouble getting it out, but it worked out. So now was the time to map everything again, lay everything out, make sure everything was in the right places, everything could fit, everything looked good when we laid it down. And honestly, I wanted to start out with the lens, because I don't care about the lens piece as much as the camera one, but it was a good practice, and starting off with it was really nice. So laying everything out looked really good. So now it was time to glue everything down. And guys, you're welcome for doing this first, because I realized that super glue is not the best for getting these things down on foam board. Maybe it was the foam board, maybe it was the plastic of the lens, but super glue was not it. Some pieces, like the electronic pieces, super glue worked really well. Otherwise, it didn't work. Luckily, my girlfriend is an amazing arts and crafts person and had super glue on hand and advised me that, hey, super glue would work a lot better. The only downside is that it gets super stringy and a little bit messy, so have some tweezers on the side to clean up, because after everything, you're gonna have to clean up these stringy pieces of hot glue, and just make sure you have some stuff to clean up. Other than that, that stuff is absolutely amazing. Hot glue is my go-to now. I don't know why I was so pressed on super glue, hot glue is amazing. Now once I had everything glued down and happy with, you know, the placement of everything, now was time to test it, the moment of truth. And before that, I had to wipe everything down, clean it, use some glass cleaner to wipe the frame, make sure that there was no stringy pieces on the board itself from the hot glue, and then we just jumped straight into it, took the frame piece, flipped it over, put it in, and well, it didn't fit. I had accounted for all the dimensions except for one thing: the depth of the frame itself. I didn't want to stop now, so I set the lens aside and worked on piecing the camera together. Everything looked absolutely freaking amazing from the board itself, so we just had to get everything down, and it was time to do the depth test again. Putting everything into place, you know, making sure that everything was in the right place. You know, there were a little bit of things off from, you know, the actual mapping itself. It wasn't Vistaprint's fault, it was my fault because I hadn't accounted for a lot of things. So some pieces that I wanted there didn't get the chance to be there, and some pieces were kind of slightly off, but that was okay because in the end it turned out looking pretty much really good, almost the same as how I wanted it to be. But there was just some things that I, you know, were a bit irregular, or some other pieces that I ended up finding that I did want to put in place instead. So those are all things that I have to take into account. But again, everything looked really good after putting everything down with the super glue. So now we do the depth test again. And well, again, without fail, the frame was not deep enough. But this time with the camera, it was a lot easier of a fix. All we really had to do was fix the front frame of the camera because we were getting too much depth from the top, the piece with the flash, the actual top of the camera. So I was okay with taking that piece out completely because, well, it wasn't really necessary, so it's fine. It's completely fine. So now with that, the front frame of the camera can kind of lean down a bit and add a bit more clearance. And again, it still was a little bit too big, but nothing that we couldn't just squeeze in. So I pushed down really hard and started locking the frame, and at the end of the day, it fit. Everything was really good. Taking a look at the piece, it looked amazing. There were some pieces that were losing glue, so I had to go back and fix that, you know, add a bit more glue, fix it up a little bit, and then it was good. Besides that, do a little bit more cleaning, you know, clean up, make sure there's no dust, make sure everything is good, the glass is clean, and the camera piece was done. This was the product. It looks absolutely amazing. Sure, I really do wish that we could have that top piece in there because I feel like it adds a lot of character to it, but at the end of the day, it's fine. It looks amazing and I couldn't be happier. Now, what about the lens piece? I tried to fix it, and at the end of it, I wish I decided to use the same solution earlier that I ended up using at the end of it, but I went to pick up some sandpaper and began sanding away at the half dome pieces for about an hour and a half, and I thought I had enough depth, but even after sanding away and breaking pieces down, it was still not enough. At the end, I decided to start breaking away the pieces with like a tool, like literally just, you know, like just literally just taking it, clamping it, and snapping it off. And that resulted in some of the pieces actually breaking a little bit too much. You know, I was hoping that I could break it enough to where I could just save some time sanding because it was taking forever and I just got really impatient. So if you guys are doing this, have some patience or just cut further, I guess. You know, if we had cut it, you know, thinner when we were doing it with the kitchen knife, it wouldn't have been as big of an issue. But one of those things to keep in mind. It still wasn't deep enough. And at the end of it, I decided, hey, I'm just not gonna put it up with glass. Glass is the obstruction, and maybe if we just do it at the end with no glass, it'll still look good. And it does look good. Let me know what you guys think. So now I hung these up in the corner of my room, right over there. You know, I really like it. I didn't really have anywhere else to put it, but they're right there. Sure, I do wish that the lens piece wasn't, you know, as broken as I left it, and I could have just taken the glass out from the beginning. It was my first time. It was an awesome project. It was super fun to work on, and I'm really happy with the results regardless. So let me know what you guys think of the final results in the comments below. Like, I know I'm not the best handyman. I am actually really not good with tools or anything at all, or knowing what to do where. So this was a really fun project for me. On top of the actual fun, it was a big learning experience because I love tech, I love cameras, I love being able to see how things work together. I'm actually like a huge science nerd. Like I love STEM. I don't like STEM, I like stay. I hate math, and math is the worst. But I love science, I love tech, I love being able to see everything work together and how everything cooperates. So all of this is really interesting to me. So having this as a learning experience and then kind of learning about the tools that I use and everything in the internals and seeing all this was really awesome. Even if I completely destroyed the camera and broke a lot of pieces and it'll never work again, I haven't framed, and that is like a milestone for me because it was the first camera I ever bought and the first lens I ever had with it. It was like super awesome, and now it's really good to have that to reminisce on and kind of as a reminder of where I started and how far I made it today. Even more special because I made it myself with my very own camera that I bought. Anyways guys, tech is awesome. I love seeing it, and that's gonna be all for today's videos. So again, let me know what you guys think of the product in the description below. Maybe I should start making these and selling them. So if you guys have any broken camera gear that you don't want, send it my way. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. It's definitely appreciated. I'll keep pushing buttons guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have an awesome day. Bye.